By Christmas? I don't think so. December 22nd, 1939. There have been skirmishes in the air so far this war, but nothing major. The British have, though, dropped propaganda leaflets by the hundreds of thousands over Germany, but that's mostly been it. That changes this week, though. This week, the British bombers attack. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Chinese Nationalist Army had small success retaking territory from the Japanese. The Soviet Red Army had anything but success against the Finns, and German and British ships fought a naval battle off the coast of South America. There is more action at sea this week, though not pitched battles. This week, 5 passenger liners used as troop ships, escorted by a battleship, a battle cruiser, and an aircraft carrier, bring the first 7,500 Canadian troops of this war across the Atlantic. Germany launches the Atlantis, converted from a freighter to an armed cruiser. Now, this ship contains a special compartment that holds 92 magnetic mines. There are also 6 camouflaged 6-inch guns and 2 AA guns. The Atlantis also carries different national flags to fly when greeting merchant shipping: British, Dutch, and Norwegian. Thing is, the magnetic mine has lost its terror, and the Germans don't know it. The day the Atlantis is launched, the British Admiralty reports that they can now use the coil system I talked about last month to demagnetize shipping and thus make it invisible to the mines. So, Winston Churchill gives instructions that whenever a ship hits a regular mine, it should be reported that it was hit by a magnetic one. In a few days, Adolf Hitler will tell Elsa Bruckmann, one of his most important patrons and supporters for many years, how Britain will be forced to her knees before the end of the summer by magnetic mines. He is mistaken. There is a battle over the sea this week, the Battle of Heligoland Bight on the 18th. This is the first real aerial battle of the war. 3 RAF bomber squadrons are sent to Heligoland Bight to attack German surface shipping there. 24 Vickers Wellington bombers take off, 2 turn back, so 22 British planes invade German airspace. Germany scrambles as many as 100 planes in response, but only 44 make contact with the enemy. The Germans inflict much more damage than they take. 12 of the British bombers are destroyed, with 57 men killed, as opposed to 3 destroyed and 4 badly damaged planes for the Germans. Those are what turn out to be the actual totals. Both sides badly overstate enemy losses. The Germans claim 38 planes shot down. The British only even sent 22 planes. This battle exerts a major influence on both sides. It forces the RAF to abandon daylight raids for nighttime ones and to rethink general bombing strategy. And it convinces the Germans that their bases in Germany are too far away to be vulnerable to enemy attack, and consequently, they will not focus much on building up their force of day fighters as part of their air defense. There is a great deal of fighting on the ground this week. The first big Soviet attacks against the center of the Finnish Mannerheim defense line, the Summa sector, come the 17th. First is a 5-hour artillery barrage and airstrikes from around 200 planes. The day's attack then comes in 2 parts. One is against the defenses on the Lähde Road. The village of Lähde itself, 5 kilometers down the road, is an important strategic junction. The attack here is begun by Russian sappers. They creep in close to the Finnish defenses under cover of the barrage, and they then set off huge explosive charges that blow open paths in the rocks and barbed wire. 50 tanks then attack in a wedge and break into the Finnish trench network. Thing is, the Finns had an idea this was going to happen, and their infantry has been ordered to not withdraw from the tanks, but to stay and fight off the Russian infantry that comes behind. The idea is that if the tanks are unsupported, they will eventually themselves withdraw. This is a pretty desperate tactic, but it works. The Finns are mauled by the tanks milling about among them, but they hold off the infantry and there is no breakthrough. William Trotter points out in the Winter War that this would not have worked had there been any coordination between Soviet armor and infantry. There wasn't. They attacked in the same direction, and that was it. The tanks would surge ahead and take some ground, and then just hang around and wait for the infantry to catch up. If, for whatever reason, the infantry doesn't or can't arrive, the tanks either withdraw or circle like a wagon train and try to hold ground through the night when the Finnish tank killer units come out and play. The attack at Summa is different. The anti-tank rocks are shattered but not destroyed, but they don't prevent a tank from advancing anyhow. They make a tank climb at a steep angle, and this renders them quite vulnerable. Soviet designers had opted for heavier firepower over all-around armor. And once you get below the turrets, there are weak spots that the Finns pretty quickly figure out. Also, once the tanks are nosed up, the Finns rush in and lay mines where the tracks are going to come down. This is not as dangerous as it sounds because the tank's machine guns are mounted too high to aim at anything in the immediate surroundings. In these two attacks, the Russians lose 35 tanks, about a third of the attacking number, and the attacks fail. The next day, 68 tanks attack at Lähde. The Finns destroy 25 of them, and the attacks there and at Summa again fail. Fighting on the 19th and 20th at Lähde leaves 58 more burned-out Russian tanks. On the 20th, a tank battalion runs out of gas in front of Summa and just sits there being picked off piece by piece. 20 tanks do manage to reach Summa village the 20th, but 8 of them are destroyed and the attack fails. In fact, in the first 20 days of the fighting on the Karelian Isthmus, the Soviets have lost over 250 tanks. Trotter writes that one Russian tank brigade commander deserted to the Finns rather than face the consequences of reporting his losses. The first large-scale offensive, 15 days long, against the Mannerheim line has failed. 3/5 of the attacking tanks have been destroyed. But if Joseph Stalin's offensive is not going according to plan, neither is Chiang Kai Shek's. His is supposed to be a series of coordinated attacks across China to take back big chunks of territory, from Shaanxi province in the north to Guangxi in the south. But Chiang's ally, Yan Xishan, who had formerly controlled the lost territory in Shaanxi, makes his own deal with the Japanese to gain control of parts of Shaanxi and pulls out of the campaign. And when the Japanese had taken Nanning last month, which cut off that route to the sea, it really impaired the nationalist army's ability to quickly deploy troops. To try to stop the Japanese interruption of southern Chinese communications, Chiang orders a counterattack from his headquarters at Guilin. On the 16th, 150,000 men strong, they set out and capture the Kunlun Pass, 60 kilometers north of Nanning in Guangxi province, the 18th. This is a strategic point. The Japanese will take it back the 19th, but, spoiler, will lose it again on the 31st. In other parts of China, on the 16th, the Chinese capture Kaifeng in Henan province after 2 weeks of fighting. On the 18th, the Chinese 6th Cavalry cuts the railroad between Hohhot and Saikin. This prevents the Japanese from moving reinforcements towards Baotou. On the 19th, the Chinese 35th Corps attack Baotou itself and enter the city on the 20th. The Japanese are pushed back to just a corner of the city, but they hold their positions awaiting reinforcements. The Chinese have made some decent progress retaking territory, but it's really just a drop in the bucket, and the Japanese are now poised to fight back, and to fight back hard. I mentioned Joseph Stalin, and I'm going to again now. December 21st is Joseph Stalin's 60th birthday, though I am aware that different sources have slightly different birth dates for him. He gets a lot of telegrams of congratulations, one from Adolf Hitler. Hitler offers best wishes for the prosperous future of the peoples of the Soviet Union. And Stalin replies, the friendship of the peoples of Germany and the Soviet Union, cemented by blood, has every reason to be lasting and firm. The blood that has so far cemented this friendship is the blood of Poles, and there will be more in the occupied territory. On the 19th, Governor Hans Frank writes in his diary about the Jews in his general government region. We cannot shoot 2.5 million Jews, neither can we poison them. We shall have to take steps, however, designed to extirpate them in some way, and this will be done. And that is the end of the week. Chinese gains dotted around the country, but the loss of an ally, an aerial battle high above the sea that is a major influence on future strategy, and more Soviet military failures in Finland. The Finns have won, and won big style at Summa, but there is a real cost. They have to rebuild their defenses for one, lay new mines and new barbed wire everywhere. All of this building will have to take place by night so they can forget about sleep. Such food as they have is poor quality, but worse than that, they have a water shortage. You can't just suck on the snow either. It's been contaminated by all the shelling, and if you do, you get terrible stomach cramps. I will end with a Trotter quote. It had been a resounding defensive victory, but the more thoughtful Finnish officers looked beyond it and wondered what would have happened if the Russians had handled their armor professionally. Their defeat had been so smashing and one-sided that it seems reasonable to assume that the Russians too would ask that very question and next time do things better. The big question is, when is next time? And since Christmas is coming up, we would like to wish you a continued happy holiday season. In difference to the Great War, the First World War, the first Christmas of this war did not see any truces, and we will be with you into the new year without pause. If you have not yet discovered our series covering other historical events, personalities, and the period between World War I and World War II on the TimeGhost channel, you can start with this video right here. And you should definitely follow the war day by day on Instagram. The link is below. And if you have not already, join the TimeGhost army at Patreon or at timeghost.tv. Our war effort needs you. See you next time.